We're reading together in the New Testament, reading first of all from Galatians chapter 2 and verse 11. Galatians chapter 2 and verse 11. We made reference to Galatians this morning, the problem in the church there, and people having begun by grace, and then works becoming more dominant in their thinking and losing sight of the Father of compassions. And so here Paul writes from chapter 2 verse 11, and we want to read through to verse 21, the end of the chapter. But when Cephas came to Antioch, that's Peter, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. Just imagine that situation. Two apostles in confrontation. For before certain men came from James, he was eating with the Gentiles. But when they came, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision party. And the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. But when I saw that their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas before them all, if you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you force the Gentiles to live like Jews? We ourselves are Jews by birth and not Gentile sinners. Yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So we also have believed in Christ Jesus, in order to be justified by faith in Christ, and not by works of the law. Because by works of the law, no one will be justified. But if in our endeavour to be justified in Christ, we too were found to be sinners, is Christ then a servant of sin? Certainly not. For if I rebuild what I tore down, I prove myself to be a transgressor. For through the law I died to the law, so that I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if righteousness were through the law, then Christ died for no purpose. And let's turn back now to Luke 15. Luke chapter 15, and we want to read now from verse 25. So the party is going on. The father is overjoyed, as is his household, at the son who has returned and been restored to him because of his compassion towards his son. And now verse 25. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and was not willing to go in. his father came out and pleaded with him, or was pleading with him. But he answered his father, Look, or behold, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you're always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Amen. Well, let's turn again to Luke chapter 15. This passage that we've been looking at today, and looking at in the light of this theme, the Father of Compassions, a phrase that we have seen comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 1. It's not an isolated phrase. It is a truth that is taught throughout Scripture, and from it flows our salvation, and the salvation that comes to the nations of the earth. And if God were not the God of compassions, we would be without God, and we would be without hope and without salvation. We have focused to date primarily on the younger son that repudiated the Father of Compassions, as he took everything, went into the far country and wasted everything. But then we also this morning saw how this son was restored to the Father on the basis of, and by virtue of, and by expression of, and demonstration of the compassion of the Father towards him who deserved nothing but justice and judgment. And of course it is no different for you and for me. We are like the younger son in that sense, in the ruin that has been brought upon us through our connection with Adam in the fall, and also then in our own actual sins that flow from that original sin. But now, this evening, we want to look at the closing section of the parable, verses 25 to 32. And often the younger son gets all the focus in terms of the one who who experienced the Father's compassion. But if we go away with that thought this evening, then we have misjudged the Father, and we have done a disfavour to the Father, because we will see tonight that the Father's compassion also reaches out to the older son. But tragically, it is rejected by the older son. And that is largely the reality within Judaism that the older son represents. That the compassion of God the Father in Jesus Christ the Son was rejected by the Jews. They put him to death. And not only did they put him to death, of course the Gentiles were involved in that as well, the Roman soldiers and others. But not only did they put him to death, but they refused, by and large as a nation, to recognize who he was as God's Messiah. And so this evening, as we come to this passage, we want to take tonight as our text the words of verse 28, and to look at the older son through these words. But he was angry. He was angry, and he was not willing to go in Therefore his father, having gone out to him, was pleading with him. The older son, the older brother, is an angry man. Anger is a big problem in our society, isn't it? We hear of road rage and various other kinds of rage, and it takes very little to push people's button, the button of anger, and it just manifests itself. And there are many at home tonight, and they are places of anger. Husband and wife, there's anger one towards the other. Parents towards children, or children towards parents, there is anger. And anger mostly in human beings, most often in human beings, is something very ugly, very unattractive, very destructive. And not only to those who are at the rough end of that anger, but actually it's equally destructive to the person who's harbouring it and the person who's displaying it. And we see that here actually in the older son. This anger eats him up, and it destroys him, and it keeps him out of the Father's house. Now, we need to be balanced here in that Scripture does speak about righteous anger, about holy anger, and that is found, of course, in God. There's nothing irrational, there's nothing vindictive, there's nothing abusive about the anger of God. And we, as his image bearers, we have that capacity for anger. But because of the fall, as I've said, much human anger is harmful and destructive and sinful. But that does not mean there's not a righteous anger. Indeed, the Apostle Paul in Ephesians chapter 4 says, become angry. He's speaking to the church. It's a command. Become angry. But then he says, but do not sin. It's so difficult for you and me, who are the Lord's people and who have a sense of the righteousness of his anger and the rightness of anger at times. It's so difficult for us to express that anger and hold that anger and not sin. To become angry, but not to sin. And it's so easy for us to justify our anger and try to suggest it is righteous, when actually it is unrighteous, and it's self-interested and self-promoting and self-centered and self-serving and self-protecting. And that's the kind of anger that we see here in the older brother. It's all about self. Whereas anger, and it's against the younger brother. So it's about self and it's against others. And perhaps that's a good definition, or a good way for us to ask in any situation where we're angry, is this a righteous anger or an unrighteous anger? Unrighteous anger will always be about self. And it will always be burst out against others in wrong ways. Whereas righteous anger is about God, and it's about honouring him and obeying him in the way in which we conduct ourselves, in the way in which we respond to people and situations. So let's think about this evening. We want to think first of all about the occasion. the occasion when this anger is seen. But he was angry. What is it that triggers the anger of the older brother? And we learn from verse 25 that when the younger son arrives home, the older son was in the field. And it is clear from verse 29 that the older son is a hard worker. I have slaved for you all these years. And so it may be the evening time when the older brother arrives home. And if that is so, then he arrives home, no doubt, hungry and tired and weary at the end of a busy day. But as he draws near to the father's house, he realizes that a party is in full swing. There's music that is wafting out over the air that he hears from a distance. And he can hear hilarity and mirth, and he knows that there's dancing to this music. So there's got to be some joyous event that has come about. And his curiosity is immediately aroused. We can imagine this older son scratching his head and saying, well, what is happening? What have I missed? Why is there a party? It's not my father's birthday. No one in my father's house is getting married. My father is certainly not throwing a party for me and my friends. He's never done that in his life. What could be the reason for the party? Something unusual. Something unexpected. Something unplanned for. Something extraordinary must have happened since I left home for my father to throw a party. And unable to find the reason within his own mind or within himself, he gains the attention of one of the servants, and he inquires of him as to the reason for the party. And the answer he's given is verse 27. Your brother has come, and because he has received him healthy or safe and sound or in good health, your father has killed the fatted calf. And as those words, your brother has come and your father has killed the fatted calf, as those two thoughts connect in this man's mind, this older brother's mind, you could see the anger rising within him. How dare he? How dare he? And so the anger is occasioned, it's triggered, if you want to put it like that, by the return of the younger brother. We'll come back to that later. Why but should he be angry? Why would he be angry that his brother, his younger brother, has come home, the brother that his father at least has missed, even if he himself has not had any regrets at him being away? Well, look at verse 30, where we see that this older son has very different opinions about the younger brother. And he's a different way of thinking. Whenever this son of yours came who has utterly devoured, and that's literally what it is, devoured like a wild animal your livelihood, just gobbled it all up, and he's done so with harlots. You killed the fatted calf for him. At one level we can understand the way in which the older brother reacts, because the younger brother's life has been one of rebellion. But you see, the problem is the older son can conceive no grounds whatsoever upon which the younger brother can be restored to the father. It's a closed issue. There's no way back as far as the older brother is concerned. This younger son has sinned. He has blotted his copybook. And as far as the older brother is concerned, his attitude is, leave him in the mess into which he has gotten himself. Let him lie in the bed that he has made for himself. Serves him right what he got. He deserves everything that has come to him. He has reaped what he has sown. Let him be. Let him be. That's the attitude of the older brother. That's the cry of the older brother. Deal with him in terms of strict law. And if my father was a righteous man, he would take him down to the leaders of the city and he would have him stoned to death. That's the mind of the older son. Punish him. Punish him. Do not pardon him. But the father who was entitled to be angry and to punish, he has found a way to be gracious. And he is pardoned. And so the older brother, why is he angry? He is angry because of his father's display of free and full compassion and forgiveness. He's angry at the fullness and the freeness of the father's compassion that will find a way by which his son can come back. You see, if we put it quite simply, the son is offended by grace. By grace. Over 10 years ago, a child killer in the United States of America was about to be put to death. And before his death, he was given the opportunity to be interviewed by the media, which he declined. He asked, however, that Dr. James Dobson, who many of you will have heard of, famous Christian counselor, family counselor, and has written books that are very helpful. He asked for him to come and see him. What did Dobson find? He found a man broken. He found a man overwhelmed at his sin. A man who had said, I have sinned, I am unworthy. But a man who was truly converted. And he grieved over the murders he had committed. He accepted his punishment, which was the death penalty. And he asked Dobson to broadcast afterwards his story, after he had been put to death. And when Dobson did, there was an outcry from professing Christians listening to a Christian network, radio or TV network. And many were offended at the mercy, the compassion that God had shown to this man in Christ. Many were cynical. And so here were even Christians. And when the rubber hit the road, when a situation became very powerful and very clear to them and very poignant, they said, how could he be pardoned? The occasion of his anger, the display of grace, the compassion of the Father. And brethren, as the Lord's people, we need to realize that we are not immune from that mindset either. Especially, as I was saying this morning, if we have come from a background where we've been taught right from wrong, and we've seen righteous living, and we've seen godliness in our parents, and perhaps grandparents before that, but we can so easily, without realizing it, subtly by the devil, we can default to failing to show grace, failing to reflect, maybe is a better way of putting it, the grace of God, the compassion of the Father. When it comes close to us in our families, perhaps children that have rebelled, or perhaps some other situation, perhaps a brother that has offended us, or somebody else who has done some great wrong to us. And perhaps it's all the more difficult if that person professes Christ. Because the reality is they shouldn't have done it, but they have done it. And the reality is there is forgiveness in Christ for them if they confess that sin. But you see, sometimes there's a lack of forgiveness among Christians. And there's a lack of forgiveness within Christian families. And there's a lack of forgiveness within the Christian church. Yes, grace is fine for me to experience. And compassion, I'll take it from God. But I will not show it to someone else. And of course, Jesus dealt with that. And he taught his disciples to pray as we pray this morning. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. You and I cannot claim to live in the fullness of the compassion of the Father and not have compassion for the sinner who's converted from the world, or not have compassion for the believer who has fallen into sin, and we're not prepared to work to find a way back for them, or to show them the way back out of their sin. And we become angry instead of being compassionate. The occasion of his anger. But then let's notice, secondly, the root of his anger. Because there's actually something that is going deeper into the life of this man, and is now actually being brought to the surface by the Father's actions and by the Son's return. And so we want to think about not only the occasion, but the root of his anger. You probably have had the experiences I have had, that sometimes you've said something to someone and wow, it unleashes an outburst of anger. And you're gobsmacked. You stand there and you just can't find words. You're taken aback because what you said was not provocative. You were not saying anything that occasioned the kind of response that you received. It wasn't offensive. It wasn't inflammatory. And you say, well, where did that come from? And later, when we reflect on the situation, we realize that what we said did not cause the outburst of anger. The truth is, the anger was already there. It was there, building up, perhaps over weeks and months and years. And it's like the volcano that seems to be dormant, and everything's fine on the outside. And then suddenly one morning or one night there's an explosion, and lava spews all over the place and leaves its effects on everyone and everything within its rage. You see, anger is a really, really dangerous thing if it festers under the surface, and if we don't deal with it. If we don't bring it to Christ, and if it's not dealt with by Christ, and our cause may be just, nobody can dispute that. It's the anger that's unjust. The cause may be righteous, but the anger is unrighteous. And so we just happen to speak to that person at the wrong time. And that's true in this parable of the older son. The return of the younger son and his restoration by the father merely triggers the anger of the older son. It doesn't cause it. It doesn't cause it. So we have to ask, what causes this anger? What's the root of it? And to answer that question, I think we have to sketch in the character of this older brother from what we know of him from wider scripture. What kind of a man is he? What kind of a son is he? Well, he's an outwardly just man. Everything is in its proper place. There's a decorum about his life. He's one of the 99 in the parable of the sheep who think themselves righteous and at home. I've no need of repentance. He's one of the 9 coins that has never become lost. He's a self-righteous man. He's a law-abiding man. He's a man that likes to make sure that right is right and wrong is wrong, and there's no blurring of the lines. He's a morally upright man. He's a good church man. He's a man of integrity. You could depend upon him. He's a man who tithes his income. He's a man who fasts several times a week. He's the kind of man, believe it or not, you and I would have been very attracted to. Many of us from our background. In a word, he is the Pharisee. He's the Pharisee. Look at what he says to his father. Verse 29. Look, all these years I've been, and literally it is, I've been slaving for you. Slaving for you with devotion. There haven't been many days that I've rung in sick. There haven't been any things that I've said to you, Father, no, I wouldn't do that for you. No, I've been slaving for you, and I've never disobeyed you. He's putting himself with the rich young ruler. All these years, since my youth upwards, I've kept the commandments. I've kept the laws. I've abided by the rules. And that's all that's needed, surely, Father. You see, he's bound to his father in a relationship of law-keeping, in a relationship of works. I have your favour because of what I do, not because of who you are. This older son, his attitude is, I will earn my right to be in your family. I will work for acceptance before you. I will be a son by law, by works, not a son by grace. And that's the root from which the older son's anger sprang. An absence of grace. He knows nothing of grace. He knows nothing of the Father's compassion and the repentance and the forgiveness and the faith that compassion of the Father brings forth and secures in the life of the younger son. And this is the root of the anger that's building up among the Pharisees and the scribes, who've been criticizing Jesus in verse 1 of this chapter because he associates with tax collectors and sinners, and he's bringing them into the family of God. You see, the scribes and the Pharisees, they don't operate on the principle of compassion. And I'm not talking here about the compassion of the worldly compassion. I'm talking about the compassion of God towards sinners, that holds sinners accountable, that provides a way of salvation, and that calls sinners to repent and to believe and to be saved. That's what we mean by compassion. You see, they're approaching God on the basis of law. They will earn God's favour. And sometimes in the lives of professing church members, there's an anger that boils over at its surface. And it's because the person would say they're living by grace. And they're living in the light. They would claim to live in the light of the Father's compassion, but there's still either too much of works or it's all of works. It can be occasioned by a simple thing as an election of elders. And here's a man, he's not been elected. He's been in the church much longer than some of the men who were elected. And he's angry. And he's hurt. And he says to his minister, "Can you not think of the years that I've given to this congregation? I came to this congregation when it was on its knees. Do the members not appreciate the work I have done? The time I've spent serving the church in some way or another? Perhaps they've been the caretaker, or they've done something else. Perhaps they've been the superintendent of the Sabbath school." And what does that way of reasoning reveal? It reveals a man who thinks in terms of law, of works and reward. Works and reward. I earned the right to be an elder. I do this. I am entitled, therefore, God, to that. He's not thinking in terms of grace. Perhaps it's just the situation, but it does reveal an underlying weakness, a seismic weakness, a flaw. That office in the church, and just as membership of the church, he fails to see it's based on grace, not law. Or think of the person who's been in the church from the time it was begun. It's a new congregation, and in the meantime new people have joined, converts from the world, and that founding member now has less influence. Perhaps they aren't visited as often because there's more people, there's more opportunities. And there's a feeling, I'm neglected. And there's a resentment that builds up because others are receiving attention. And when that manifests itself in anger, we've got to say to ourselves, what has gone wrong in my heart? What is going wrong in my heart? Because there's something happening there. And it's like the earthquake. There's some shift that's taking place in the plates between grace and works, and it's going to erupt in an earthquake if there's not some measure taken and sought of God in Christ to arrest it. But then let's notice thirdly this evening the outcome of his anger. The outcome of his anger. I want you to try and picture now inside the house. There's music, there's dancing, there's eating. There's an atmosphere of joy and thanksgiving. The entire household, the bond servants, probably the hired servants, are caught up in the joy of the Father and the return of the Son. And the older son, though invited, will have no part of it. He was angry. And notice the next words. He was not willing to go in. I'm not going there. I will not be part of that. And the Father hears of this. And what does the Father do? Does he say, well, he's of age. He's a man in his own right. He knows me from the past. He can make his own decision. Is that what the Father says? Is that what the Father does? No, look at what the Father does. He loves the older son as much as the younger son. Not more. Doesn't he love the younger son more? He loves the older son as much as the younger son. He appreciates him for not engaging in prodigal living and not wasting and squandering his resource. And he wants to have a relationship of grace and compassion with him too. Look at verse 28. Therefore his father, having gone out, do you see the Father again? The going out nature of God to sinners, yes, to those who are self-righteous, like the Pharisees. And therefore his father, having gone out, was begging with him. Was begging with him. It's not easy for a father to beg with a son, because our human nature says, well, actually, I'm somehow lowering myself. I'm somehow giving them the upper hand. Is that not how we feel? If there's times when we feel we've got to beg with our children and to plead with our children, well, that's what this father's doing. He says to his older son, do you not understand the magnitude of what has happened in the life of your brother and in the life of our family? The father tries to understand the older son as he comes to him. Imagine the father sitting down alongside him. Imagine the father putting his arm around him as he had put his arm around the younger son. The father tries to help the older son to understand. Look at verse 32. To make merry, and that's where the emphasis lies, and to be glad, was right. Was right. And why was it right, older son? Because your brother was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. But you see, this older son doesn't understand what it is to be lost. He doesn't understand what it is to be dead in sin and lost to God the Father. He doesn't know what it is to be found by God. He doesn't know what it is to be made alive by the Holy Spirit of God. And so, when the Father is saying, have you not longed for this too? The older son is basically saying, no, I haven't. I've no place for grace. The Father's compassion. But then the Father also doesn't just seek to understand him and go out to him in that way. He seeks to reassure him. Look at what the Father says to him, because perhaps the older son fears, well, the inheritance was divided once, and if this boy comes back, it'll be divided again. And my 2/3 will be diminished by another third. But you see, that's not the case. The Father declares, everything I have is yours. I gave you the 2/3. It's yours. It's yours. But even that is not enough to make this son willing. And the Father has done all he can to bring the son in. But there's no suggestion that the son came in. He continues unresponsive, in spite of his father's reassurances, in spite of his father's attempt to help him understand what has happened. And brethren, it's nothing short than the rejection of the Father's compassion. And you see, when it comes to the bit, the rejection of the Father of compassion by the older son is more serious than the temporary repudiation by the Father, of the Father by the younger son. It's more serious, isn't it? Because there's no repentance. There's no seeking mercy and grace. And there, my friends, we have the refusal of grace. The Father of compassions refused by the older son. And he spoils the party. He spoils the party. And the older son, when he's found in a congregation, he spoils the party. He spoils the peace. He spoils the joy. He spoils the spirit of prayer, the spirit of expectation. He spoils the ability of the younger son, the person in the world, to be converted and to come into the church and to feel at home in the church. Because the older brother operates in a different way. And that younger brother who has wasted their lives feels, I'm being judged. I don't fit in. I'm not accepted. And it was the Father that made sure that that didn't happen here. That the younger son was accepted, even though it meant that the older son would stay outside. And brethren, you and I have got to be like the Father of compassions. In our families, in our church family, we've always got to stand for grace. And sometimes that puts us in very, very difficult situations that we would prefer not to be in. And we've got to stand with grace. And sometimes that means in our families standing against those who are our own flesh and blood, whom we love and whom we want to come in. But when it comes between this struggle between grace and works, there's only one place we can stand. And the same in the church. And that's what Paul was doing in Galatia. That's why he withstood even Peter, the true believer, the great apostle, to his face. Because there was a struggle going on inside Peter at this moment in time because of the Judaizers that had come down to Antioch. And there was a struggle going on in Peter between, is it grace or is it works? And he was falling into the works camp. And Paul said, no, Peter, you are wrong. Barnabas, my dear colleague, you are wrong. Think of what that meant for Paul to do that. With Peter, who was with Christ, who was in Christ before Paul. Think of what it meant for Paul to do that with Barnabas, the one who took Paul and brought Paul into the church. And now Paul's having to withstand the man who was the instrument of him becoming the great servant of the church. Yes, brethren, these things are difficult. But where there's anger, and where there's a dependence upon works, whatever has been before, and we see the evidence of works, and we see the rejection of grace in our families, in our churches, in our friendship circle, and we are asked, basically, where do we stand? We've got to stand with grace. Otherwise, we make a serious mistake and we dishonor the Father of compassions. He was angry. He was not willing to go in. Therefore his father, having gone out, was begging and pleading with him. And that was condescending on the part of that father as much as watching and running towards the prodigal. And if tonight you are not in the kingdom of God, and you do not go into the kingdom of God, realize where the responsibility lies. It doesn't lie with God. How often he would have called you. How often he would have taken you. How often he did call you in his word. How often he would have taken you to himself. But you would not go in. And every person that ends up in hell, this will be what will be written over them. He, she was not willing to go in. Yes, even after the Father had gone out and sent his Son and crucified his Son on the cross, and the Father had begged and pleaded, come in, there's room for you. There's plenty of grace. May it not be said of any of us that we were not willing to go